So we have a panel discussion now, and I want to sort of just start the sort of with a little bit of an overview. I don't know, Jerry, if you've still got some slides, but I had a couple of things I just wanted to share with you before we got started. And that's really because we've heard a lot today about the intersection between technology and sustainability. What we've heard less about is the reasons and the drivers for this change. There's a lot happening out there, and at the same time, it's hard to know where to prioritize our efforts. So if I click this, does something actually happen? Maybe it doesn't. That's fine. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you was that we heard a little bit this morning, particularly about embodied carbon and the work that's been going on, within some of the technologies, within some of the industries around. And I'm just back from a trip to China with the BC government's trade mission, and one of the things that really brought home to me the reason and the drivers for change is what's happening over there. Now, we were there as part of the wood industry, a wood and low-carbon building trade mission. So the Premier was actually talking about the global presence that British Columbia in particular has, and Canada in general has, in terms of our expertise bringing low-carbon solutions, and both operationally and in terms of the materials and choices that we use. So, here in this part of the world, we can really deliver truly low-carbon buildings. And that's important because, as you can see, in China, the scale of what they're doing right now is colossal. So we were in Beijing and Shanghai, the Yangtze River Delta region is about 40% of the construction economy in the country. So Shanghai City, about $100 billion worth of construction volume a year, right? BC is about 15 billion, just to give you some context. So one city is almost 10 times what our province can do. And they have not only developed low-carbon building assessment frameworks, but they're now looking for help to really transition their economy. They are the largest carbon trading market in the world, and they have also got a very highly intensive concrete industry. So for them to actually transition to wood products, there's a really interesting sort of climate benefit that you can see right away. And in fact, they have now got a regulation that by 2020, 100%, and I'm not kidding, 100% of their construction in that $100 billion category has to be prefabricated. So you think about what that means to the technologies that we are developing today, and how we still are not really hearing about the construction end of what we do. So it's not about, we're still talking about building information management, not fabrication information management, right? So they are already thinking about manufacturing as a key driver for the uptake of some of these technologies, and sustainability is simply a benefit that comes along the way because they can monetize those savings by switching from potentially concrete to wood. So there is a report that you can find on the Naturally Wood website. That's a very cool website if you haven't seen it already. It's got a whole lot of information about embodied carbon life cycle assessment, and that particular report looks at the policies that are being developed to help enable us do sort of embodied carbon reporting and ultimately evaluation. So you heard the city this morning, they ask for it already for rezoning and affordable housing projects. There are countries all over the world that are doing it, and the Netherlands is one of the foremost leaders in this area already. So I just wanted to sort of inspire you in terms of the policy side, the transformational side, and the fact that if we don't get our act together, we're going to get eaten by Asia, who are already end-running us on a number of different things. So with that motivation in mind, I want to bring up three panelists who are going to really provide some perspectives from their vantage points as different key stakeholders in our industry. We've been very sort of high level in some cases throughout the day. And really, I want to bring this back to practicalities. What are we seeing on the ground? What are we working on a day-to-day basis to make all of these visions a reality? So I'm going to invite our three panelists up. I'm not going to give you the full bios. I believe you can find that in the agenda and in the program documents, but they're too extensive for me to read out anyway. So we've got, first of all, Michael Nyikes, who's the Provincial Director of Standards and Construction for the BC Government's Ministry of Education. So he looks after all of the schools that get built around the province. So Michael. And then we're going to hear from, so maybe I'll just introduce everybody, and then Michael, you're going to come up and do your talk, and then our two other panelists will follow. So then we also have James Emery, who's the principal of Iredale Architecture, a firm that's been quietly or not so quietly adopting BIM for many years and probably has a really good perspective of the sort of track record of what's been going on and some of the issues and challenges along the way. And then finally, we'll hear from Fiona Famulak, who's the president of the Vancouver Regional Construction Association, who's going to be giving us sort of the contractor's eye view in terms of what her members are seeing and experiencing on the ground as these technologies are being implemented in the field. So I'm going to pass it over to Michael first, and then I'm going to come and sit back down there while you do your talk, and then I think we'll all join together at the end on the stage for questions. Okay? Oh, you don't need to clap yet.
Thank you. I was looking at the picture there on the screen, and believe it or not, it is a recent picture of me. I just decided to grow a beard over the course of the winter to keep myself a little bit warmer. But the picture you saw a moment ago actually was me, and it is quite recent. So I'll just take a moment here to get myself set up. If you bear with me for just one moment, please. Thank you. So, first of all, thank you very much for having me here today. I've got what I hope you're going to find to be quite an interesting presentation from BC government's standpoint on some of the issues. Now, I work for the Ministry of Education, and my role there is the provincial director overseeing all standards and construction within the Ministry of Education. And so that's going to be things along the lines of new schools being built, additions, expansions, the seismic mitigation program, so all the seismic upgrading. And there's about 8 or 10 different programs, and I'll go into it a little bit here in a moment, just to give you guys an idea of who I am and what I'm kind of bringing to the table, or hoping to. And you'll have to forgive me as I look down here. We have a monitor in front of us, and that's kind of helping me see how we're doing for time, as well as where my presentation's at. Okay, so the discussion today is going to be, as you see on the screen there, I'm just going to go over a little bit about the organizational chart within the Ministry of Education, our mandates, commitments, what our programs are, what our investments are from 27-18, as well as our procurement methods, sustainability and resilience measures. So that's the discussion today. From an organizational standpoint, our executive is Minister Fleming. Our Deputy Minister, Assistant Deputy Minister, and Executive Director are listed there on the screen. And so for the Ministry of Education, from a leadership standpoint, there's myself and my colleague Ryan. Between the two of us, we oversee all of the construction projects around the province. So capital mandates and commitments, the government, the new government as they came in, identified these items: accelerating the seismic program, building and upgrading schools throughout the province, creating an ongoing fund for playgrounds, decreasing the number of portables throughout the province, and eliminating barriers and delays. And you can see, being from the Ministry of Education, it follows a theme of A, B, C, D, and E. There is an F, but I won't say what the F was. So for capital programs and the areas that I'm responsible for, as I identified, it's a seismic mitigation program, the expansion program, replacement, which is construction of new schools. There's an annual facilities grant program, and I'll go into a little bit more detail here on these items in a moment. The building envelope, bus acquisition, carbon neutral, and school enhancement. So with the seismic program specifically, that is a program that's set up with capital funding to allow school districts to be able to strengthen, replace, or eliminate schools that are determined to be of high risk. The expansion program is basically, it's adding student space to areas of rapid growth around the province, and that's through new classrooms or new schools, The replacement program is replacing aging facilities that are basically end of life. Annual facilities grant are grants that we provide to the schools to manage the day-to-day wear and tear on their schools. So these would be things like painting the schools, of course, replacing fences, doorknobs, and everything else that you can imagine from a day-to-day standpoint. The building envelope program addresses building envelope issues with facilities that were built between 85 and 2000. Bus acquisition program speaks for itself, school buses. Carbon neutral is improving the efficiency of schools and reducing the that reduce operating costs and energy consumption. And then the school enhancement program is investments between about $100,000 and $3 million that contribute to the safety and the functioning of schools, and they extend the life of the asset. And so some of the projects which would be involved in SEP would be things along the line of electrical upgrades, energy upgrades, health and safety items like fire systems, mechanical upgrades, heating, ventilation, plumbing, roofs, of course, exterior walls, washrooms, flooring, etc. So that's kind of a lay of the land in regards to the work that I'm involved with. So from an investment standpoint, you can see the numbers on the screen from 17-18. The Ministry of Education, that was the amount of funding in each one of those particular programs. It comes up to, what is that, $566 million roughly per year in capital investment for these types of capital projects. That was for the 17-18 fiscal. We are fast approaching the 18-19 fiscal, and I've got an increase to my budget of about $100 million. And so that $100 million will quite likely be put more towards building new schools, as well as the seismic mitigation program. That's where investment is being made by government currently. At any given time in the course of the year, I've got about $2.5 billion worth of construction on the go throughout the province at any given time. So there's lots of stuff going on. Procurement methods, you guys all know these. The most common that we're finding with the school districts are they're following a design bid build or a design build methodology. The school districts that are a little bit more sophisticated and perhaps are better resourced follow a construction management or CM at risk approach. There's an early contractor involvement style of procurement, which is basically CM, but it's bringing in more of the contractors up front. And that might resonate with some of you as what you've heard in regards to integrated project delivery. I'll speak a little bit more about that later on. But those are the procurement methods that we're seeing primarily. And so from a sustainability and resiliency standpoint, and I'm speaking a little bit more broadly across government, how government's approaching it. It's not just strictly the Ministry of Education, but government as a whole. Things are being designed to LEED Gold or equivalent standards. Now, there is no actual government policy in place that mandates this, though. So it's been approached more as a recommendation, as a best practice, but what you're seeing is a lot of the capital projects that are being done out there that are publicly funded are, in fact, being built to those standards, stepping up from the basics of the BC Building Code. The Wood First Act, again, there isn't necessarily a policy in place with government on this, but industry is going to see a larger push for wood usage. Helen alluded to this a little bit a moment ago when she said that there's going to be a lot more mass timber and vertical construction using wood coming down the pipeline and being advocated by government, and that's because the soft lumber trade deals with the U.S. are changing, and there's going to be more of an emphasis on more timber usage in the province. So that's coming down the pipeline. We heard a little bit earlier from Brad in the morning on that too. I remember he had mentioned it. Integrated project delivery, well, garnering more interest from government and industry as a beneficial procurement option. So this is coming along for us as well. The BC Step Code. Now this is where things are going to get a little more interesting and relevant to our discussions here throughout the course of the day. So in August 2016, the province committed to taking incremental steps to increase energy efficiency requirements in the BC Building Code with a target of net zero energy ready for all new buildings by 2032. The province introduced a voluntary BC Energy Step Code in April of 2017 to support that effort. And that's providing a clear market signal regarding the direction of the BC Code for probably the next 15 years. It's focusing on measurable performance-based energy efficiency requirements for construction that builders can choose to build to. And the proposed step code introduces targets for thermal energy demand intensity and total energy use intensity and air tightness. And these all follow the passive house principles. And net zero ready is the last bullet I've got on the screen there. So net zero ready is being defined as building to a high energy efficiency standard that could, with some additional measures, generate enough on-site renewable energy to meet its own energy needs. And so the step code is really working towards having that in place for 100% of the newly built buildings throughout the province by 2032. So from a government standpoint, that's kind of where we are at. And that basically brings me to the end of my presentation. Did you want to do questions now, or did you want to wait till later?
Yeah, we'll just do it.
Very good. So thanks for the opportunity, and I look forward to some questions in a moment. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here today to talk a little bit about our experience of working with BIM for the last probably 15 years, I think it is now. I was just talking with Bob Heyman from Summit Technologies at the break, and we were trying to remember when he first came to me and said, you should take a look at this. And this is Revit, that's the platform that we use. And partly because I had been quite a challenging client for him. He'd been trying to get me to use some 3D software with the AutoCAD package, and I can't even remember. I think I chose not to remember it, but it just wasn't fulfilling our needs. But when he brought Revit to us, I said, this is what we're looking for. I can see the potential of this platform. And at the time, I really didn't fully understand the full potential of it, but felt, let's bring it into the firm. And so we did in about 2000, I guess it must be 2003, and we've been working with it ever since. But has it been easy to implement and get all the partners buy-in? Of course not. Do we still have 100%? No, we don't actually. We have different platforms. We're using AutoCAD, we're using Revit, we're using Vectorworks. We're using all of those. We have one of our offices is just Vectorworks. But it is still officially our main platform that we use at Iredale Architecture. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about and go through some of the project typologies that we have been using Revit with. Is this what I use? Yeah. And so talking a little bit more about using BIM in our office, and talking a little bit about the consultant, client, and contract. Oh, there it is. Okay, consultant, client, and contractor relationships with regard to using BIM. And the last item there, resource use, is about the idea of how is this benefiting us? How's this working in terms of a sustainable world and how we're proceeding? So I'll go through some of the slides of the projects and I'll talk about each of these things, but maybe I'll just talk about this idea of buy-in and bringing it into the firm and working with it. So essentially what I first saw with the use of Revit was it was a great tool for being able to model everything. There was scheduling and all that you could do. I mean, I think I was talking with Geraldine, she said from Summit also at the break, where she was saying, I don't have to schedule a door again, right? So it's a nice, it was a nice idea. And I also saw the potential from a design perspective, where a lot of all that time that was spent in just making sure your elevations matched your plans, matched your sections, that didn't have to happen as much because we could actually spend more time up front with design. So right there initially is that sense of efficiencies, better use of our resources, and a better end product at the end of the day. So that's great, but going beyond that in terms of understanding how to use it even in more depth, I'll talk a little bit more about as we talk about some of the projects. So let's go to, well, actually this project right here. This is Burrard Bridge. And so infrastructure. We don't do a lot of infrastructure, don't do a lot of bridges, but somehow I became the architect of this project. And this was modeled by Denis Gauthier over here at the table, who's here during question period to answer questions that might be too technical for me to answer. So if you want to go there. But in this particular instance, we took the old drawings, of course, and we converted them all into Revit. And those were then transferred to the structural engineer, who was the prime consultant on this project, and also to our lighting consultant, who took that to model it for the new lighting that's on the bridge and the celebratory lighting, etc. So that's, and then of course, we had to provide presentation materials to get buy-in from the city and all the different interest groups that were involved, because we were making a radical change to this particular project, which of course included putting suicide fencing on there, which wasn't eagerly anticipated by many. But hopefully we did a successful integration of it. But that's essentially how we used Revit in this experience. But you can see that there are benefits to using it, because one of the things is between each of those posts there, all of those are different along a 1.5 kilometer bridge. And to model it just using Revit, or just using an AutoCAD form and then trying to transfer that and sending that information off to the contractor would have been extremely challenging. So Revit provided an opportunity to send a model out that had all that information embedded. Master planning. So this is a project out in the Lower Mainland, where we're taking several blocks of a downtown core of one of the communities out there and completely redeveloping it. And in this case, this model you see here is actually Vectorworks, but we will actually transfer that into Revit. And of course, there's a lot of potential here in terms of efficiencies and time use, et cetera, with our massing studies, our FSR calculations, our parking, our sun shading analysis, et cetera. We have a lot of opportunity when working with this kind of project to really provide that data, and we still provide it in a form, as the last speaker was saying, is hard to understand. And so we still have to develop that and still have to figure out how to work with that. And one of the challenges we have, our clients don't fully understand how BIM can be used for them and for their purposes. And so we are not given the opportunity as architects, and this is part of the problem with buy-in throughout this whole process, of being able to have the time to produce what the client actually really needs to be able to make their decisions, their analysis, and to work with projects. And we can talk more about that in some of these other typologies. So tenant improvements. We almost have never used Revit for tenant improvements, but we started doing that. And this particular client, TD, when they had an RFP out for an architect of record for British Columbia, they asked for Revit. Didn't say why, just asked for Revit. But so we're using Revit on these projects. And I think that's another issue. Clients, or actually just a continuation of that discussion I was just mentioning about clients understanding what they're really looking for and what they really need and what they can get out of it. You know, is this model then going to be used by their facilities management team to work with and understand their operations? I mean, the value for us from a perspective of using BIM for this is we can, all of that you see in here, almost practically everything you see in this branch here, including the walls inside, are all pieces that are tagged. They're all furniture items, actually, or equipment items. And so they can be tagged, they can be scheduled. It's easy just to send it off to the supplier, and it's all done. It's all ready to go. We have some efficiencies there in terms of procurement. And actually, no, I won't. I was just going to mention one other thing, but I'll have a slide for that coming up in a moment. Buildings. Oops, that's exciting, isn't it? No. So I think a number of you went through this building yesterday, the Exchange Tower. And yeah. So this, we've been living with this for a while, as is not unexpected when you're going through a rezoning. And the beauty of this project is the retention, almost a complete retention of the existing heritage building and this tower. And this is probably where we've used Revit to the fullest capacity that we've been able to date, where a lot of the scheduling, a lot of the information that's in there, we've been able to transfer to the contractor, to our structural engineers, to our mechanical engineers, and we've been able to work with them to actually make things work a little bit better. So, for example, with the integration to that heritage building, which is always a challenge, of course, when you're dealing with existing buildings, and there were so few issues in the end in terms of coordination and making things fit, because the model was there and everybody had access to it and could work with it. So there's still issues for sure in terms of structure and trying to put a building on top of an existing building, but we minimized it as much as possible, and that was an exciting aspect of using this technology. So, and of course, here's these wonderful charts that you can't read, and nobody really likes to read, but it has all that information that you need. So we had everything modeled, even the parking, et cetera, so that any changes we made to the parking, et cetera, was just automatically generated. All of those things that were important from a rezoning perspective were just automatically regenerated. And all the material quantities, et cetera. It's all that stuff we know that BIM is able to do. I mean, that's what we were doing in this project. And then you can see here in the lower sketch, I mean, I don't know if you can tell what's going on there, but that was our conflict resolution diagramming with mechanical systems, which are always a problem. And especially in that heritage building where we had low floor-to-ceiling heights, we had very tight space to work with, and we had to really work with conflict management. So those are some of the things that we've dealt with, and I've just highlighted and touched on some, but hopefully that might generate some thoughts and questions for our discussion period. So thank you for your time.
So thank you, Helen, for the opportunity to be on this panel, and thank you to Jerry and to Scott for the opportunity from CanBIM to participate today. Really, really fun and really interesting conversation. I missed a chunk in the middle of the day, but really good stuff in the morning, and I'm sure there'll be some good conversation at the cocktail reception tonight. So with that, Here we go. Is this what it works? There we go. So, like every audience member, I like to know where the presenter is going to take me in the next 10 minutes. So, what I'm going to suggest is that I'm going to share 4 key messages with you. I'm going to provide some context around the BC construction industry and also the key milestones that affect everyone in this room. I want to talk about the need for disruption in construction, and then I want to leave you with some closing comments and I think probably a call for action that we need your help to drive some change. So let's get started. So in terms of the BC construction industry, it's a $15 billion industry, meaning that it delivers $15 billion worth of completed projects per year, a drop in the ocean compared to China, sounds like. But on any given day, for example, we have today on the books $325 billion worth of construction proposed. There's approximately $75 billion worth of construction in process today. So all of those big numbers combine to amount to roughly $15 billion per annum, which tends to be the average for BC at the moment, given its capacity. But as we leverage technology and as we become more productive, I would imagine that that number will go up. We employ over 225,000 men and women in the industry, so we're BC's #1 employer, and we contribute just under 9% to GDP. So the industry is large, it's important locally, regionally, provincially, and nationally. We are ripe for change, I think. I think we're also approaching a tipping point, and I want to chat with you about that in the next few minutes. The industry itself is an important solution to climate change, hence the focus on zero-emission building. It responds to urbanization demands, and we're very familiar with what that looks and sounds like in Vancouver. It's a consumer of new technologies, hence the focus on BIM and other technologies, as well as a huge consumer of materials. So there's a lot of input going in to feed the construction engine. It also is facing some key milestones, and the milestones that I'm going to touch on affects everyone in this room. So, first milestone, by 2027, the BC construction industry is going to be facing approximately a skilled labour shortage of 15,000 jobs, with a real pain point around 2020, 2021, 2022. That's a different conversation for another presentation. By 2032, we've heard from Michael, we heard from Brad today in his presentation, that the industry will be required to be building net zero ready buildings. We also heard from Brad today that the City of Vancouver has cranked up the pressure a little bit. That milestone in terms of the City of Vancouver is 2025, so we only have 7 years to make it happen. And by 2041, we expect to welcome approximately 1 million new people to Metro Vancouver. They will have relocated to Metro Vancouver, which means they need homes, they need transit systems, they need places to work, and they need places to play. So the industry itself is under huge pressure, upward pressure, to build faster, greener, cheaper, more productively than ever before. And if I wear my Scottish accountant hat for a second, I would also offer that we need to build more profitably than before if we're going to be successful and sustainable over the long term. So that's the context. We've got the size, we've got the key milestones down pat. What's the need for the disruption? Well, we know that we're not going to get to 2025, 32, 41 without some change. The business as usual isn't going to cut it, and therefore we need disruption in construction. And what I want to do, for the next couple of slides is to present the case for the importance of education and also present the case for technology in order to help industry. And by industry, I mean the entire supply chain, from owners, whether they be public or private, consultants in every discipline, contractors in every discipline. We all need to be leveraging education and technology in order to meet the milestones. So Brad, in his presentation this morning, referenced that we're very close to signing a contract with them. So the Vancouver Regional Construction Association is delighted to be within a few days of signing a contract to host the Zero Emissions Building Centre of Excellence. It's the first in Canada. Nothing like it has been created to this point. And it has influence, or it has the ability to influence, not just how we construct in Vancouver, but also across the Lower Mainland, across British Columbia, and then also across Canada. So we know that, for example, Toronto has something similar in its radar. I want to acknowledge and thank the City of Vancouver for their vision and for their ambition to aggressively reduce carbon emissions from buildings. It's a lofty goal. We heard Brad speak to it today. We're on a mission. We really are on a mission, and we look forward to hosting the centre with them, along with a number of other partners. So, for example, we will be working very closely with Passive House Canada, with the Open Green Building Society that brings technology intelligence to the centre, as well as other entities like the Canada Green Building Council, BC Housing, the academia, all of us working together to deliver the education, the ideas exchange, the thought leadership, the events, the networking that will be required in order to set up the industry in its broadest form to succeed and to meet those milestones that we referenced a little bit earlier. If education is the bridge to excellence, which I truly believe it is, then technology is one of the bridges to improve productivity. And we know that our industry is slow to embrace technology, which is kind of ironic given that Vancouver is the home to a burgeoning technology industry where startups and well-established companies are already selling into the industry and want to do so going into the future. So we have a few things to do. From a VRCA perspective, I think we have the role, I think we have the duty to build the bridge to the tech industry. We want to be the front door to the construction industry for those guys and girls. So for anybody who's a tech person in the audience today, lean on VRCA to be your front door to the construction industry. Number two, we want to help the industry embrace technology in all its forms through education, through demonstrations, establishing communities of practice, and so on. So what does that mean from a practical point of view? I'm all about kind of connecting the dots. For example, we host an annual construction leadership forum in Whistler every year. It's coming up at the beginning of May. And this year, we've carved out a portion of the program to enable our tech members, looking at Autodesk also, you need to be on that, to make a pitch to the audience. It's kind of like a Dragon's Den type of environment where the tech companies will make a pitch to approximately 200 dragons in the audience about how their technology improves productivity in the industry. It's not a sales pitch in terms of you should buy, it's all about how the technology improves productivity. So we're looking forward to seeing how that rolls out. It's just one idea, but it's things like that that we'll be delivering ourselves and also through the Zero Emissions Building Centre of Excellence. And then the last thing that I want to seed with you is, although technology is an excellent productivity tool, I encourage the employers in the room to think of it also as a recruitment tool. Think of the numbers of students leaving high school, leaving colleges, graduating, and so on. They are the perfect candidate with the right training, with the right coaching and mentorship to leverage technology in your company and to secure the productivity benefits that you're looking for. So please use technology to recruit the brightest and the best. In terms of what we do at VRCA specifically, I just want to highlight one example of how we've been supporting BIM education in the last few months. Last year, we partnered with the BIM Academy out of the UK to deliver the BIM Virtual Project Workshop in November. The BIM Academy is co-founded, or was co-founded in 2010 by the Northumbria University along with Ryder Architecture as a centre of excellence for digital engineering and transformation. So over the course of 2 days, they facilitated the BIM Virtual Project Workshop, where the participants were given laptops fully loaded with various applications and software that they needed. And they worked through building a templated project, a pretend project that was located in the city of Vancouver. And at the end of the 2 days, the individuals would have, or did, have experience now firsthand on the software. They were able to understand how to get the very best out of the software. They learned best practices, and they were able to go back to their companies and make it work on the ground. So that's one example of how we support BIM. There's many other examples of how we support technology generally. Really well received. We really believe in putting our tentacles out there and bringing the thought leaders to Vancouver. And the next BIM virtual project workshop will be held in June 21-22. If there's anybody who's interested, let me know. So while my comments are meant to set context and hopefully inspire you to embrace education and technology, I also want to make it very clear that many of our members within the association are already doing that. It's not that nobody's doing anything, it's just that the pool that's really leveraging technology at the moment is a small pool, mainly of large general contractors, large trade contractors, and we need to grow that pool. So I want to give a shout out to our member Ellis Dawn, and we've got Xenia and Tom in the back there, who graciously allowed myself and Sanjeev to be on site when the next 3 projects came up out of the ground. So here we go. We've got BIM at Brantwood, Brent at the Park Casino in downtown Vancouver. That was an awesome project. BIM really, I think, helped to put a very large project on a very small footprint. And then BIM at the Emily Carr Art and Design. I cannot speak to the technicalities of those slides. Please connect with Xenia, she's right there, who was project manager on a couple of them. My message, though, by showing you these slides, my message to you is twofold. We need to grow the pool of contractors who are using BIM. As I say, the pool is very small at the moment. And if there is interest, my second call to you is, if you are interested in learning more, let me know, because we can, through our reach, establish informal communities of practice specific to BIM, where we can bring people together to exchange ideas, provide mentorship, and so on. So if that's something that gets you excited, let me know and we'll make it happen. So in closing, everyone in this room is affected by the milestones that we spoke about a little bit earlier. Everyone in this room can embrace education and technology as a way of procuring more efficiently, designing more efficiently, constructing more efficiently, and measuring building performance. And everyone in this room, I am inviting you to join us in the journey so that we are helping the industry become more modern, more efficient. It leverages education, it leverages technology, and we promote the heck out of it as a very, very cool industry to work in. So please join us in our journey. Thank you. Here we go. Oh, right.
So yes, I'm going to invite Michael and James, if you'd like to come up and join us on the stage. Question for Michael, which I know came up this morning. We've been talking a lot about BIM standards and mandating the use of BIM. And so Michael, you know, we've heard about the UK government has mandated BIM on projects over a certain value. I think it was £50 million, $100 million. And it's been a huge driver of creating standards and, you know, creating a sort of consistency across the industry. I mean, could this happen here, do you think? And if not, why not?
Do you want me to stand to speak?
Just sit there, and if you can, yeah.
I should use the mic. Is it on? It's not on. Oh, is it? Yeah. Oh, I can't hear it up here. I'm not getting the feedback. Yeah. Thanks. It's a good question. I think you have to appreciate where BIM being mandated in the UK came from. I think the UK is probably about 15 or 20 years ahead of us in this regard. Back in 2003, the government created a white paper that articulated the fact that they wanted to reduce their usage of energy by 60% by 2050. Doesn't sound too bad. That was in 2003. Now, in 2006, they had changed the building codes and they introduced an energy code. And their first point of focus was on the residential housing sector in the UK. And what they did was quite a good job of incentivizing the opportunity for builders through what they called the Green Deal, which was a rebate program for builders to adopt the energy codes and to pursue building the residential product to a higher level. So this was basically starting as a catalyst and pushing the industry forward. Now in 2016, they had identified that all of the residential structures that were going to be built throughout the UK had to be net zero. So that's, they had about a good 10-year head start on this. So how does that translate to Canada? How does it translate to British Columbia in particular? Well, like I said, I think we're behind by about 15 years. Procedurally, what would happen within the BC government, and I think we're starting to see that now with the step code, the energy step code that's been introduced, is that they've targeted 2032 to have everything net zero ready. And from a functionality standpoint, BIM is going to help to facilitate that and expedite that so that the BC government's going to be able to hit their goals by that time frame. Would they legislate BIM? I don't know if they would, because I don't think that they would want, the government would probably want to take any nimbleness away from the industry to be able to adapt, and government is known as moving a little bit slowly. Industry and technology outpaces codes and outpaces legislation all the time, right? And so I don't think they would bring in legislation to mandate it, but they would definitely be a very, very strong advocate because it is a very useful tool. I'm an architect by vocation, Jim. And I remember in practice 25 years ago, I was using ArchiCAD and then went on to AutoCAD, and Revit was coming into its own and BIM was being integrated. And it was very, very exciting technology. So it's been around, there's lots of early adopters, and I think that that just needs to be built upon.
Yeah, thank you. Everybody happy? Okay. So I have so James, you were talking quite a bit about sort of the issues that you've bumped into along the way, and it's, you know, it's really interesting to see what a diverse practice that you run, from bridges to TIs and towers in between. So you've clearly seen a full range of facility with technology, and the kind of the, you know, the consultants that you work with, the owners, and obviously the contractors and trades. And, you know, we always hear about the fact that there's always someone in the team who's the holdout, right? That doesn't want to do this. Email is too much for them. That, you know, you really have to spend so much time getting them on board, getting them familiar, and, you know, not so resistant. And we saw, you know, images throughout the day of dealing with resistance. What is there an underlying reason that you can pinpoint? Is there sort of ways that you've, you know, kind of deployed encouragement, coercion, or whatever it is? What do you do to get everybody playing nicely?
God, I wish I knew. It's interesting because, of course, I alluded to the issue that even within our own office, we have had challenges with buy-in from all of my partners and some of the staff, etc. But I mean, we have actually officially made Revit our standard platform that we are to use. But it's, you know, it's there. It's with our consultant team. It's with the clients. And it's with the contractors to a certain extent, although I think the contracting side of things has much more buy-in, because it really, they've seen the benefit in terms of their construction practices of using BIM and being able to make efficiencies happen. I think where it's a real struggle for us is having a client buy-in and understanding of the value of this technology for them, and being able to request that of us in the first place. And I do think if they did request it of us in the first place, and so there's education that has to happen there with the client groups. If they request us, then that means we would have the time to actually invest in it, and the consultant teams, sorry, would have the time to invest in it. There's so much we can do with this technology, and one of the things that we looked at, for example, I'll just take one, is at one point we were looking at an add-on to Revit called EcoTech, I think it was called, which allowed us the opportunity to model the envelope of buildings, and you change it up, you can see what the effect is almost immediately, sort of real time in terms of the effect on the energy consumption of the building. But who's got the time to put into it if the client doesn't allow for that to happen? So that's one thing. There's more I could go into, but I'll stop there.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's
you.
probably a key element.
Yeah, so owners. And owners are such a disparate group. It's very hard to kind of get them all in a room together and have that conversation, right? And maybe that's something that VRCA... Fiona, do you want to comment on that?
Absolutely. I think... oh, am I on?
Yes.
I am, okay. I think there is a need to host an event or some sort of dialogue where we're bringing the owners together, along with the contractors and the consultants, to have the conversation about value. So that, because we know within the industry that there's a lot of focus on perhaps choosing the lowest bid, getting the work started, and that gets it, or can get us in trouble. The lowest bid doesn't always necessarily get you the best value. So I think there's a conversation to be had. I think it's starting. I think the contractor base, to James's point, wants to be able to have the conversation with the owners about value. They're just not quite sure how to broach it, because the owners come with budgets and with timelines, which are, they're mandated too. So I feel for the owners as well, but I think there is an opportunity for us to have that dialogue and to begin that conversation, Helen.
Can I just on top of that, so we've actually been talking with some contractors about actually coming to client teams, especially ones that are repeat client teams or ones that we have standing offers with, and looking at how we can actually change the whole process right from the very beginning, so that we're all around the table together right from the very start of the project. And this is the integrated project delivery, really, right? It's this process, but we haven't really had the contracts in place to be able to do that. But now with this new, which I haven't seen yet, but the CCDC, the new CCDC that's coming, it looks like we may have an opportunity to make that more of a reality than what it used to be.
Yeah. Michael, I know procurement is your thing, and you and I have talked on the phone more than once about IPD and where things are at with the government. Do you want to sort of talk a little bit more about perspectives on integrated project delivery and where your thoughts are heading in that direction?
Yeah. With integrated project delivery, Jim hit the nail on the head here. There's a CCDC 30 document that's going to be brought out this spring that I've had the benefit of looking at and comparing it against some. You guys still hear me? Mm-hmm. Comparing it against.
You're good. Keep going.
Comparing it against the Hanson-Bridget contract out of the States. Government's big issue with the IPD model currently is that there's a lot of risk associated with it. Contract risk, and from a procurement standpoint, government's got a big level of uncomfortableness with IPD right now. Design, bid, build, CM at risk, those are tried, tested, and true, and they're not quite as challenging for government, but IPD is a bit of an uncharted waters type of a scenario. However, there's a lot of upside to it, and I think with CCDC 30 coming out in the spring, that's going to bridge a lot of those contractual gaps and a lot of the contract language gaps and the risk is going to be mitigated to a great degree. I'm a fan of IPD personally. I see that, and BIM plays a very key part of this, because with integrated project delivery, you've got all the players in the room at the same time. It's front-end loaded. You can have people that are part of the team who are working through cost analysis using BIM and design analysis using BIM right from the very get-go. And as Fiona mentioned a few moments ago, least cost option, lowest cost option is always the thing that everyone's after. Government for sure. Government looks at least cost option for everything, and that's because government is playing with the taxpayers' money, and the taxpayers are very sensitive to that transparency and openness in regards to how the money is being spent. That's why least cost option is always the route that government tends to take. However, there isn't always a lot of good value engineering built into least cost options. I think with IPD and with the integration of BIM in those early stages, what it does is it eliminates the least cost option scenario by just bringing out the best design for the best price right out of the chute. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I see it anyhow.
Can I add to that? It's a really good conversation. It's very topical at the moment because IPD is a hot topic of conversation. Let's not wait, though, for the CCDC 30 to be reviewed and to be accepted. There are things that we can be doing right now to pave the way for IPD. IPD is just one procurement model of many, and Michael referenced them in his presentation. IPD, though, relies heavily on lean construction principles being implemented. So things like collaboration, things like getting design buttoned down at the front end so that everyone knows roles and responsibilities, we know budget, and the project moves swiftly and smoothly throughout. So we can be doing those things today, and it's not done enough today. So I think there's a huge education opportunity, not just around lean construction. Their conference, by the way, is coming to Vancouver in April, so stay tuned for that. But also to raise the awareness and the education around IPD itself, because not many contractors in Canada are implementing IPD at the moment. So we've got education for everyone, owners, consultants, and contractors to address.
Great. And I mean, on the topic of improving the quality of documents, Fiona, is there something that you want to, that's been a topic amongst the construction community for some time. Is there any kind of discussion around the role of BIM in improving quality of documents?
Let me get my thoughts straight here. There's a national discussion going on at the moment around, and it's unfortunately been called quality of documents. I'm uncomfortable with that title because I think it brings into question the quality of the documents. I think it's completeness of documents that is the issue, not the quality. I do believe that the consultants design what they can with the budget that they're given. But there is a national conversation to see how we can work together, owners, consultants, and contractors, to improve the completeness of documents, because we know, everyone in this room knows, that the completeness is not as complete as it could be. And when contractors are asked to price on incomplete drawings, which can be as low as 50% incomplete, they obviously price in risk. Which is neither good for the private owner or the public owner. So there is a conversation happening. In the Lower Mainland, what we would like to see, and what I will be doing, is reaching out to our counterparts in the Lower Mainland, architects, engineers, and owners, to see if we can move in baby steps towards improved completeness within the Lower Mainland. If we're waiting for national to do something, it'll perhaps take a long time. So let's see what we can do on the ground here. And absolutely, Helen, to your question, BIM does have a role to ensure that there's consistency across drawings, that there's conflicts identified, and so on and so forth. So yes, technology will help that process. We just need to commit to moving the dial and making it better.
Right.
Can I just add to that? Yeah, so, and just to that, from an architect's perspective or a designer's perspective, understanding what the contractor needs is not something that we always have right? So so what we do provide sometimes is not actually what the contractor needs, it's something else. And if we can early on identify what the contractor actually really needs, then our documentation can even be improved further.
So I'm going to just check in with you guys. Any questions from the floor? I have more questions up here. You're all looking very relaxed.
You're doing a very good job.
Very relaxed. It's lovely. All right. So, because one of the things that I think what struck me today is, I see all of the logos of all of our sponsors. Again, thank you for you guys, and construction companies, consulting firms. It is admittedly the big companies who are playing in the BIM world right now. And we all know that when we get out, particularly on a construction site, as we sort of drill down through the supply chain, so we're bumping into smaller and smaller businesses who may not have the bandwidth capacity to invest in some of the expensive technologies that may be necessary. So, Fiona, your members, most of them are small businesses, right? As much as we have big companies in the room, how do they engage with this conversation?
Many of them don't. To be honest, 75% of our members are small to medium-sized members, so which is reflective of the business demographic in BC generally. So that's not a surprise. And you're right, the large companies tend to engage more easily because they have the bandwidth, they have the time to dedicate to these kinds of discussions. I think our role as an association is to ensure that we actively engage the smaller contractor, whether it's a general, a trade, manufacturer, supplier, and unpacking perhaps technology so that it's less intimidating. I think there's a perception, rightly or wrongly, that technology is complicated, it's expensive, it takes time to learn. Well, yeah, of course it takes time to learn. Most things, new things do, but we're trying to, with our team, reach out to the smaller companies and engaging them in productivity conversations. What are their pain points, and what are they doing about it? What can we do to help them address productivity? And when you're able to translate the lack of improved productivity to the bottom line, that helps the conversation. Yes, they may have to invest in technology. Yes, they may have to invest in education, but and it's not going to give you an immediate ROI either. But if they're looking at it from the long term, if they're looking at the opportunity, we can engage them, and that's when they begin to think about, okay, maybe we should plug into an education course, or maybe we should be looking at how BIM can improve. So it's a slow process because we have a large membership, but I think the one-on-one conversations are very, very helpful, and also I ask the larger contractors, whether they be generals or trades, to share the way. Like, the small guy cannot compete with the large contractor, so share what you're doing, because by the time they pick it up and implement it, you'll be on to something else. So so we're trying to kind of create mentors and sharing of ideas to inspire the smaller contractors to get on board.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we've come to an end of this session. I want to thank our panelists, James and Michael and Fiona, very much for your perspectives. I think making it real for everyone, I think, is a really important aspect. So, yes, thank you again for your time and for traveling, Michael. And I want to thank you all for staying with us for the end of the day. I think that there's some closing remarks, and then the cocktail reception starts, which I guess that's what you're all staying for, which is exciting. So thank you again, everyone. See you then.